I didn't say a word when she did it. I just set down my fork, folded my hands in my lap, and looked at the tablecloth. My name is Claire Whitfield, and for most of my adult life, I have been the daughter my mother forgot to brag about. I'm 31 now. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Austin, Texas, and I run a small bookkeeping firm that I built from nothing. I have 3 employees, a client list of 42 small businesses, and a savings account that would make my 22-year-old self cry with relief. None of that matters to my mother. It never really did. Because my sister Brooke became a pediatric nurse practitioner, and in my family, that was the finish line. Everything after it was just commentary. I need to back up. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, a mid-sized town where everybody knew everybody else's business, and your family's reputation followed you into every room you walked into. My parents, both of them, worked hard. My father drove a delivery route for 30 years. My mother managed the front desk at a dental office. They weren't wealthy, but they were proud people. Proud in the particular way that small-town Southern families are proud, where pride is measured not in what you feel, but in what you can show others. Brooke is 4 years older than me. She was, from the beginning, the proof my parents could point to. She was the one who got straight A's without being asked. The one who volunteered at the hospital on weekends in high school. The one who cried when she didn't make the honor roll once, in 7th grade, and treated it like a personal catastrophe. My mother told that story for years, like Brooke's perfectionism was something worth admiring. Maybe it was. I just know it didn't leave much room for the rest of us to be anything less. I wasn't a bad student. I got B's, occasionally A's. I liked math. I liked spreadsheets, weirdly, from a young age. The way numbers had to balance. The way there was always a right answer hiding somewhere if you looked carefully enough. My father used to joke that I should have been an accountant. He meant it kindly. My mother always changed the subject when he said it. When Brooke got into nursing school, the whole family celebrated. My aunt drove 4 hours from Memphis. My grandmother made her red velvet cake. There were balloons. I was 16 and I sat at the table and I was genuinely happy for her. I want to be clear about that. I was happy for her. I just also noticed that when I got a perfect score on my algebra final that same month, my mother said, "That's great, honey," and went back to planning Brooke's going away party. I filed that away somewhere quiet in myself. I didn't talk about it. I was not the kind of kid who made a scene. When it was my turn to leave for college, I got a partial scholarship to a state school in Nashville. Not far, but far enough. I studied accounting and finance. I worked part-time at a tax preparation office my junior year and discovered something I hadn't expected. I was good at this. Not just passing my classes good. Genuinely, naturally, find the error in 40 pages of records good. My supervisor, a woman named Donna who had been doing taxes since before I was born, told me at the end of that first tax season that she wished she could clone me. I graduated. I got a job at a mid-size accounting firm in Nashville. I worked there for 3 years, learned everything I could, and then, at 26, I gave my notice and started my own business. That is a scary sentence to type. It was a terrifying decision to make. I had $11,000 in savings, a laptop, a home office that was also my dining room table, and exactly 2 clients, both of them small restaurant owners I'd met through Donna. I worked 18-hour days for the first year. I ate a lot of peanut butter sandwiches. I moved to Austin because a former colleague told me the small business market there was booming and the cost of entry was lower than Nashville. He was right. By the end of my 2nd year, I had 20 clients. By the end of my 3rd, I had hired my first employee. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a startup with investors and a ping-pong table in the break room. It was a real business, built one client at a time, and it was mine. I told my parents about all of this. I called home regularly. I sent Christmas cards. I visited twice a year. And each time I talked about the business, my mother would listen for about 45 seconds, and then she would say something like, "That's good. Did I tell you Brooke's clinic is expanding?" And we would spend the next 20 minutes talking about Brooke. I want to be fair. I don't think my mother is a cruel person. I think she decided early on who each of her daughters was, and she never updated her file. Brooke was the success. I was the one who would eventually figure something out. That was the story she told herself, and after a while, it was the story she told everyone else. I became aware of this in pieces. A cousin mentioned at a birthday dinner that my mother had introduced Brooke as her daughter, the nurse practitioner, and referred to me as Claire. She does something with numbers. Another time, my aunt said almost gently, "Your mom talks about Brooke's job all the time. What exactly is it that you do?" She hadn't heard. In 4 years of me building a business, my mother had apparently not mentioned it. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was building something for myself, not for their approval. And mostly I believed that. But there's a version of yourself that you keep alive in spite of believing something. And that version of me still wanted my mother to be proud of me. She was my mother. I don't think that wanting ever fully goes away. The Christmas before last, I flew back to Clarksville. My mother had decided to host a big dinner, not just immediate family but extended family too. Cousins, aunts, my uncle from Chattanooga, a few of my parents' friends from church who had known us since we were children. 14 people total, seated at a long table my father had set up in the living room, with 2 folding tables pushed together and covered with a tablecloth my grandmother had embroidered decades ago. I arrived on the 23rd. Brooke was already there with her husband, Marcus, and their 2 kids. The kids are cute. I like Marcus. He's a quiet man who grills exceptional ribs and doesn't talk much, which in my family is something of a survival strategy. Things were fine at first. I helped my mother in the kitchen. I peeled potatoes and washed the good china and made small talk with my aunt, who was newly retired and wanted to talk about her garden. Normal family things. I was okay. I was even, genuinely, looking forward to the dinner. The table filled up on Christmas Eve. People arrived in waves through the afternoon. The house smelled like pine and my mother's sweet potato casserole. My father put on his Christmas playlist, the one he's had on an old iPod since 2009. There was noise and laughter and my little cousins running through the hallway and my Uncle Frank telling a story about a fishing trip that definitely got more dramatic every year. I was standing near the kitchen doorway when my mother started doing introductions. She moved around the table the way she always did at these things, hand on someone's shoulder, saying names and relationships for the benefit of anyone who'd forgotten or hadn't met. She got to Brooke and Marcus and she said, "And this is my daughter Brooke, and her husband Marcus. Brooke is a pediatric nurse practitioner over at the clinic in Brentwood. She just got promoted to lead practitioner this fall." And there was a little ripple of impressed sounds from around the table. And Brooke smiled the way she always smiles, and Marcus nodded, and their kids said hi in unison. Then my mother got to me. She put her hand on my shoulder, the same gesture, and she said, "And this is Claire." A pause. Just a beat too long. And then, "She handles our finances." That was it. She kept moving. A couple of people smiled at me and looked back at my mother. The conversation continued. No one asked a follow-up question. Handles our finances. I sat with that sentence for a moment. I turned it over in my mind the way you turn over something you picked up off the ground, checking to see what it is. Not a nurse practitioner. Not a business owner. Not someone who runs a firm or employs people or has spent 5 years building something from scratch. I was the person who handles our finances. Like I balanced her checkbook. Like I was a household service. I looked at my plate. I looked at the tablecloth. I noticed a loose thread near the edge, and I thought about my grandmother's hands making this, all those years ago. Nobody at that table knew what I actually did for a living. I was sure of it in that moment. My own relatives, people who had known me my whole life, had no idea that I owned a business, that I had employees, that I had spent the last 5 years doing something real. Because my mother had never told them. She had told them about Brooke, in detail, with pride. She had told them about Brooke's clinic, and Brooke's promotion, and Brooke's kids' school performances. And she had told them that I handled finances. Whatever that meant. I didn't say anything right then. I poured myself a glass of water, and I helped pass the rolls, and I answered when people spoke to me, and I did not, at any point, let my face show what was happening underneath it. This is a skill I learned young. It is not always a good skill to have. Dinner was long. Long in the way that family dinners get when everyone is slightly performing and the wine has made the volume rise and 3 different conversations are happening simultaneously. My Uncle Frank's fishing story came up again. My cousins argued about whether a movie was good. Brooke talked about her clinic for about 15 minutes, the new intake system they'd implemented, the difficult cases she couldn't name but could describe around the edges, the way her team had handled flu season this year. She's good at her job. She's genuinely good at it, and she knows how to talk about it in a way that sounds important, which it is. I don't begrudge her that. At some point, my mother stood up to do a little toast. She does this at holidays. She's done it since I was a child. She raises her glass and says something about the year and about the family and about being grateful, and everyone raises their glass and drinks, and it's a nice tradition. I've always liked it. She talked about the year. She talked about being thankful for health, for everyone being together, for the food, for my father's 31 years on the same route and his upcoming retirement. And then she said, and especially grateful for Brooke's promotion this year. We are so proud of everything she's accomplished. She's always been our shining star. People raised their glasses. I raised mine. I looked at my sister across the table. Brooke was smiling, a little embarrassed, the way she gets when compliments come. And she doesn't want to look like she's enjoying them too much, even though she is. And then my mother sat down, and the conversation split apart again into noise, and I sat there with my glass still slightly raised, and I thought about every Christmas I had driven or flown back to that house. Every phone call. Every "that's great, honey." Every introduction that contained the words "she does something with" or "she handles" or nothing at all. I thought about my $11,000 and my dining room table and my 2 first clients and Donna telling me she wished she could clone me. I thought about my 3 employees, all women, one of whom just bought her first house this year and sent me a photo of the front door with a key emoji and a heart. I thought about 42 clients who trust me with their businesses' financial lives. And I thought, clearly and without particular anger, I am done being a blank space in this family's story. I set down my glass. I touched the napkin in my lap, and I said, not loudly, but clearly enough that the table quieted. People heard the shift in register, the specific kind of voice that means something is actually being said. I'd like to say something too, if that's okay. My mother looked at me. Something moved across her face. Surprise, maybe? Or uncertainty. She nodded. I'm really proud of Brooke too, I said. She works incredibly hard and her patients are lucky to have her. I looked at my sister when I said it. I meant it. She looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I also wanted to take a second to introduce myself properly, since I don't think everyone knows what I do. I kept my voice even, not cold, just clear. I own a bookkeeping and financial services firm in Austin. We've been operating for 5 years. I have 3 employees and 42 clients. We help small business owners, a lot of them women, a lot of them first-generation business owners, keep their finances in order so they can focus on actually building what they're building. I paused. I started it with $11,000 and a dining room table, and I'm proud of it. The table was quiet. Not uncomfortable exactly. More like the particular quiet that happens when something real has been said in a room that's been full of performance. My father was looking at me with an expression I had not seen before. Something open, something almost startled. My Uncle Frank had his glass halfway to his mouth and had forgotten to finish the motion. My mother was very still. I looked at her. Not with anger. I want to be precise about that. I was not angry in that moment. Or if I was, it was very far down. Underneath something steadier. I know I'm not always great at talking about myself, I said to her, just to her. But I've built something I'm really proud of, Mom. I just wanted you to know that, and I wanted everyone else to know it too. She didn't say anything for a moment. The quiet stretched. Then my aunt, my father's sister, a woman who has never in her life let an awkward silence sit if she can help it, said, 42 clients? Claire, honey, that's incredible. And the table started to breathe again, people turning toward me with actual questions. My cousin asking how I found clients. My Uncle Frank, of the fishing stories, saying he wished he'd had someone like me when he was running his landscaping business in the 90s. I answered them. I talked. I had not talked about my business at a family table in 5 years. And here I was, talking about it. And people were listening. I did not look at my mother again for a few minutes. When I did, she was eating. Her face was composed. But there was something in the set of her jaw that I recognized. She was working something through, turning something over, the way she does when she doesn't want to show that she's been surprised. After dinner, while people were having coffee and pie in the living room, my mother found me in the kitchen. I was rinsing plates. She stood next to me and picked up a dish towel and started drying. And neither of us said anything for a minute. Then she said, I didn't know it had gotten that big. I know, I said. I thought you were still, she paused. I thought it was still just something you were figuring out. I turned off the faucet. I turned to look at her. It's been 5 years, Mom. She was quiet. She folded the dish towel carefully, the way she does when she wants to do something with her hands. I should have asked more, she said finally, and I could tell, from the particular flatness of her voice, that this was as close to an apology as she knew how to make right then. She is a proud woman. She does not reverse easily. Yeah, I said. You should have. I turned the faucet back on. We finished the dishes together in silence, and it wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't angry either. It was the silence of two people who have said a true thing and are not sure yet what to do with it. The rest of Christmas was quiet in a different way. Brooke pulled me aside later that night after the kids were in bed and Marcus had fallen asleep in the armchair. We sat on the back porch in the cold, wrapped in blankets, and she said, I didn't know either, about how big it had gotten. I know, I said. She talks about my stuff because I tell her everything, Brooke said. I've always just told her everything. Brooke said. I've always just told her everything. I didn't realize she wasn't hearing the same from you. She wasn't asking, I said. Brooke was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm sorry. I should have noticed. I thought about that. I looked at the backyard, the dormant grass, the fence my father built the summer I was 12. You didn't do anything wrong, I said, and I meant that too. Brooke didn't build the dynamic that swallowed me. She just lived inside it, the same as I did, from a different position. You should come visit Austin, I said. See the office. She looked at me sideways. You have an office now? I've had an office for 2 years, Brooke. She laughed, one sharp little laugh of disbelief. And then I laughed too. And we sat on the porch in the cold for another hour talking about nothing important, which was, I think, exactly what we needed. I flew back to Austin on the 26th. I sat in the window seat and watched Tennessee disappear underneath the clouds. And I felt something that I didn't have a clean word for. Not relief exactly, not victory, not peace. Something with more texture than any of those. Something like, "I was here. I said the true thing. I did not perform my own smallness to make anyone else comfortable." The week after I got back, I had a call with a new potential client, a woman who had just opened a second location of her bakery and needed someone to help her figure out how to structure the books for both locations without losing her mind. We talked for an hour. By the end, she said, "I feel like you actually understand what I'm trying to do here." I told her that was kind of the whole job. After I hung up, I sat for a minute at my desk. A real desk now, in a real office, nothing like that dining room table 5 years ago. And I thought about what I had said at Christmas dinner. Not the dramatic version of it. Just the fact of it. I introduced myself. I said what I do. I let it be real in a room where it had never been real before. I think about the women I work with, the bakery owner, the boutique manager, the woman who just opened a mobile pet grooming business at 53 after her kids grew up. All of them building something. All of them doing invisible work that makes someone else's visible work possible. All of them, at some point, standing in a room where someone underestimated what they were carrying. I think about what I would tell any one of them, sitting across from me in my office, if they asked what to do when the people who are supposed to know them best don't see them. I would say, tell them. Not to prove anything. Not to make them feel bad. Just to put the true thing in the air, where it belongs. You don't have to make them understand right away. You just have to stop pretending the gap isn't there. My mother called me in January. We talked for 40 minutes, which is longer than we've talked in years. She asked about a specific client I'd mentioned at dinner, the restaurant owner who had expanded to a second location. She asked how that was going. She asked about my employees by name, because I had mentioned them in December and she had apparently written them down. It was a small thing. It was a start. I don't need her to be my biggest fan. I stopped needing at somewhere around year 3 of the business, when I realized the person who needed to believe in it most was already sitting at the desk every morning, opening the laptop, doing the work. But I won't pretend it didn't matter, hearing her ask. It mattered. She's my mother. You build the life first. You tell the truth about it when you're ready. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the people who couldn't see you finally look up. And sometimes at a Christmas dinner in Clarksville, Tennessee, 14 people go very quiet, and you realize they were never the audience you were building for. But it still feels good to be seen. I've thought a lot about what it actually cost me to stay quiet for so long. Not in some abstract philosophical way, but concretely, in rooms, at tables, on phone calls where I heard my mother describe my sister's life in vivid detail and mine in a sentence that didn't even name what I did. I thought silence was the mature choice. I told myself I didn't need external validation, that building something real was enough on its own, and that was partially true. But the other part, the part I didn't want to examine too closely, was that I had gotten so used to being overlooked that I had started to participate in it. I stopped mentioning the business. I stopped correcting people when they got it wrong. I made myself smaller because it felt less risky than taking up the space I had actually earned. What I understand now is that there are consequences to that, and they move in both directions. When you consistently show people a smaller version of yourself, they will believe it, not because they're cruel, but because people generally accept the information they're given. My mother didn't know how big the firm had gotten because I had stopped telling her. Some of that is on her. She should have asked, and she didn't. But some of it is on here. She should have asked, and she didn't. But some of it is on me. I handed her a blank space and then felt hurt that she left it blank. The night I spoke up at that Christmas table, I wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. I wasn't performing. I was just done allowing a version of myself to exist in that room that had nothing to do with who I actually was. That's not revenge. That's just correction. And the quietness that fell over those 14 people, I think they felt the difference between the two. Nobody looked uncomfortable the way they do when someone makes a scene. They looked surprised. Like a fact they've been missing had just arrived late to the table and was pulling up a chair. What I know about building something, whether it's a business or a skill or just a life you can actually stand behind, is that nobody hands you the right to take up space. You have to decide at some point that you've done the work and the work is real and you're going to say so. That decision doesn't come from ego. It comes from a kind of quiet self-respect that you develop slowly, through years of showing up even when no one is watching. Donna watched. My clients watch. My employees watch. The woman who sent me a photo of her first front door with a key emoji and a heart, she watched, and their belief in what I built is the thing that made it possible to finally say it out loud in a room where it had never been said before. Brooke and I sat on that porch in the cold and laughed about the fact that she hadn't known I had an office. That laugh mattered more to me than anything else that happened that Christmas. Because it meant the gap was closable. It meant the distance between us wasn't permanent. It was just unmaintained. You can always choose to start maintaining something. It's not too late until it's too late. And most of the time it isn't yet. My mother called in January and asked about my clients by name. That's a small thing, but small things are how people change. Not in grand gestures, but in the slow accumulation of paying attention when they didn't before. I'm not waiting for a transformation. I'm just letting what's real be real. One conversation at a time. You build the life first, then you tell the truth about it, in that order. Always in that order.